Hello, welcome to the presentation on the social dilemma of immigration and deportation. My name is Maria Roldan Torres and I am a senior at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, majoring in social work. I am a BSW intern completing my practicum at the Center for Community and Transitions under the program of Families Doing Time. In this presentation, we will be exploring the complex issues of immigration and deportation, shedding light on the challenges faced by families and individuals affected by these policies. This is an overview of what we will cover throughout the presentation. First, we will examine the challenges faced by those who wish to enter the country legally and the current immigration laws that make it difficult. Next, we will discuss some of the common myths about illegal immigrants and provide factual information to dispel these misconceptions. We will also explore how being undocumented in the United States can impact a person's life on a day-to-day basis. Moving on, we will delve into the topic of deportation and its impact on individuals and families. This is an important issue that affects many people across the country. Finally, we will provide information on legal rights for undocumented immigrants and share resources that are available in Charlotte to assist in navigating the immigration system. Some people hold a misconception that entering the United States legally is an easy process. However, the government's strict regulations make it incredibly challenging, with even the most extreme legal options being difficult, if not impossible, for immigrants to pursue. Getting a visa to enter the United States is more like winning the lottery, with few slots available and many people applying for them. As you can see, the picture on the right is an illustration from a 2018 worldwide Gallup poll that states that approximately 158 million people who want to immigrate permanently to a different country selected the United States as their top choice. However, from those 158 million, only 32 million people were eligible and attempted to become U.S. legal permanent residents in 2018. Of the 32 million people, only less than a million were allowed to enter the country. This means that about 80% of people wanting to immigrate to the United States could not even attempt the process, and about 99.4% did not even qualify that year. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 established laws and regulations for immigration into the United States, which restricts permanent residence visas to new immigrants to a mere 675,000 visas yearly. To legally reside, work, or study in the United States, individuals must obtain a permanent resident visa or green card, which they must renew every 10 years or until they become citizens. Under the current immigration system, there are only 4 types of immigration visas available, including family-sponsored, employment-based, diversity lottery, and refugee and asylum visas. In the following slides, we will explore each visa and their requirements. By examining this restrictive immigration system, we can gain a better understanding of why many immigrants turn to illegal immigration and risk their lives to escape poverty or danger in their home countries in search of a better life. Types of U.S. immigrant visas. So the first type of available visa is the family-based visa. And on the right, I have a table that I created that showcases who is eligible for family-sponsored visas and the preference allotment and cap on the visas granted per category. Family-sponsored visas account for the majority of visas given out, and this is due to the Immigration Nationality Act of 1965, which prioritized family reunification. So to be eligible for this type of visa, you must have either a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident living in the United States who can petition you. However, the flaw within this type of visa is that preference is primarily given to the immediate relatives of U.S. citizens, adults who have no numerical limit and account for almost half of green cards each year. So as you can see in the table, immediate relatives refer to spouses, unmarried children under 21 years old, and parents of U.S. citizens. So, as a result, this leads to a significant wait time for those further down the preference allotment, sometimes stretching into years due to the low cap on family-sponsored visas. This cap was last updated in 1990 despite the large number of people applying for them each year. It is also important to note that if you do not have a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident who can sponsor you, this visa is not even available for you, which many people trying to come to the United States legally do not have. The second type of visa available is an employment-based visa. Only 140,000 employment-based visas are given out yearly. These include the immediate family members accompanying the primary visa holder. Employment-based immigration is a challenging path for most aspiring immigrants due to limited categories and the high cost of the process, which only a few immigrants manage to qualify for. The caps on these type of visas are even lower than the family-based. As you can see on the right as well, I created a table that shows the requirements and limits. The employment-based visas can be divided into two categories: self-sponsored and employment-sponsored. Those who may be eligible for self-sponsoring must fall into the categories of Section 1, individuals with extraordinary ability; Section 2, those with a national interest waiver or physicians who can work in a shortage area for 5 years; and Section 5, major investors who can invest a minimum of $800,000 and create at least 10 full-time jobs in the United States. It is important to note that the amount of money required to invest has been going up throughout the years. So those individuals not eligible for self-sponsorship have to resort to having an employer sponsor them and fall into the categories of 1, 2, 3, and 4 as shown in the table. Very few immigrants can qualify for employer-sponsored visas because the law limits the number of applicants to extremely narrow requirements and imposes so many costs that only a few employers are willing to go through the process. So basically, the employer has to be able to prove that they really need you and cannot find someone with your top skills in the United States. The third type of visas available are under the refugee program and asylum. Refugees are individuals who are allowed to enter and reside in the United States because they are unable to safely return to their home countries. This is typically due to experiencing persecution or having a well-founded fear of persecution based on the 5 protected grounds, which include race, belonging to a specific social group, political views, religion, or national origin. Only very few people qualify to receive a green card because the cap is established by the president and preference is given to the countries considered as the nationality of concern. The requirements to be considered for the refugee program are also extremely narrow. As you can see, to qualify, the persecution must be of serious physical harm, coercive medical or psychological treatment, invidious persecution or disproportionate punishment, severe discrimination, and severe criminal extortion or robbery. According to the Cato Institute, the government does not treat many actions that could provoke fear as persecution. Some examples include verbal harassment, death threats, a single wrongful arrest or a single detention of several days, illegal searches, expulsion from public school, and legal discrimination not deemed severe. The persecution can also not be a result of a societal breakdown, armed conflict, or war. This means that victims of the biggest forced displacement events do not qualify for the refugee status based on those events. The applicant must also be able to provide proof that they were forced to flee their country and cannot return, or returning may put them in danger and are not able to settle in the transition country that they are applying from. The table on the right shows the current presidential determination on refugee admissions for the fiscal year of 2024. The refugees for this year are capped at 125,000 visas. Asylees are individuals currently in the United States or at a U.S. port of entry and request protection based on the same 5 protected grounds as refugees. They may apply for asylum within 1 year of arriving. There is no limit on the number of asylums granted each year, or any specific categories for determining who qualifies. The diversity visa is the last available pathway for immigrants to enter legally into the United States. The diversity visa program was created in 1990 in order to promote the diversity of the immigrants present, and the visas are restricted to countries that have sent less than 50,000 immigrants in the past 5 years. So as a result, many countries are excluded, including those that have high number of illegal immigrants present in the United States. As you can see, the picture on the right shows the countries that are ineligible for the diversity lottery, which is the dark purple, and then the light purple shows countries that are eligible to apply for the diversity visa. And according to the Cato Institute, many individuals apply for the program, but only a fraction of the 55,000 green cards available are given out each year. In the year of 2021, for example, 11.8 million people applied, but only 18,912 green cards were issued. And this is due in part to the government's failure to process applications in a timely manner before the end of the year. So as a result, many of the visas go unused, even though a lot of people applied for them. And as you can see, the chances of winning the diversity visa is very low, with 0.2% of winning. And even if you do get the diversity visa, you have to still meet certain requirements, which means that you have to have a job that pays at least a poverty line or enough savings to cover the difference, or have a higher education and money to support yourself until you find a job, or have a relative or close friend in the United States who can sponsor you. So that's still not too bad, but regardless, the chances of you winning them are very low. And in fact, since the government doesn't do their job of processing the applications, it is still very difficult to get a diversity visa. In the following slides, including this one, I'm showing an illustration created by the Cato Institute that shows how complex and difficult the immigration process is. As you can see, the process of applying for a visa is far more difficult and is more than just filling out an application. You have to go through a series of screenings, and you have to pay so much money. And at any point through the process, you can still get denied, and you may be required to start over if your appeal doesn't get approved. So what about the millions of undocumented individuals already present in the United States? Unfortunately, under the Title 8 U.S. Code, illegal immigrants are criminalized due to breaking the law by entering the United States without permission or overstaying a visa. Under the Title 8 U.S. Code 1325, it is a misdemeanor for entering the United States unlawfully, and those who come back after being deported are charged with a felony under the 8 U.S. Code 1326. What makes it even more difficult for undocumented individuals to apply to become legal permanent residents is the Immigration Nationality Act of 2012, which it states that if you're a non-citizen and have gained more than 1 year of unlawful presence in the United States after April 1st, 1997, you will be permanently ineligible to receive a visa, adjust your status to become a legal permanent resident, or be admitted in the U.S. port of entry. So if you're inadmissible, what this means is that you cannot get a green card and you cannot get your status adjusted. So you still are eligible to apply for 4 types of waivers. The problem with this is that if you came to the United States illegally, you cannot apply for a green card inside of the country. So you have to leave the country and go to a consulate, the US consulate at your home country. So the problem with this is that if you have stayed in the United States unlawfully for more than 180 days, you may face a re-entry bar of 3 or 10 years. These waivers are used before departing the country, but they do not guarantee that you will be allowed back inside. And as a result, many people don't do this because even if they get the waiver and they go back and they tell them that you have to remain out of the country 3 or 10 years, even after they complete the 3 or 10 years of bar, it doesn't guarantee that they will get that visa. So even if they complete the years and they don't get the visa, they have to pay for a coyote to come back again. And even so, getting a coyote and going through the illegal route again doesn't guarantee that you would be allowed to enter the country because it's far so risky to go through the border. And even worse, if they catch you at the border, you can get charged with that felony and face incarceration. So it's just far too much of a risk for undocumented individuals in the United States to apply for that green card. And we are in a dire need of getting an immigration system that helps those that are undocumented in the United States to get that green card because you need it on a day-to-day basis for so many things. So in this slide, I want to talk about the common myths about illegal immigrants. And as some of you know, there's been so many common myths and stereotypes, some of them gained from the Trump administration, with one of the common ones being immigrants coming into the United States are criminals. And in this slide, I want to talk about some of the four common myths, but it's important to know that there's so many others out there. So the first myth that I want to talk about is myth number one, which states that immigrants do not want to integrate into American society, they don't want to learn English, and refuse to adopt American values. This myth is false. The reality of this is that according to research, statistics shows that about after 15 years of immigrants living inside of the United States, 75% of them speak English, and 50% of children of immigrants are bilingual by the age of 8. Let me not even get started on applicants of DACA. And what DACA is a deferred action childhood arrivals, which allows them to have a work permit. They're children that came into the United States when they were young, and they're allowed to work and go to school and do all the things that other Americans do. The only thing is that they don't have the citizenship as Americans, but they integrate into the society, they pay taxes, they do all these things according to the American values. So this just shows that this myth is false and that immigrants do adopt the American values and do contribute to our society. Myth number two states immigrants are taking good jobs away from U.S. citizens. And this is false. In reality, in 2014, unauthorized immigrants made up 5% of U.S. workers, which most of them working in farming, construction, which are jobs that are less favored by U.S. citizens. And because they don't have a social security, they have limited number of opportunities of where they can work because a lot of the jobs do require social security. So they have to work in the jobs that pay low wages and they don't get the benefits. Sometimes they're stuck working in poor working conditions. So this just shows how this is actually false. Like they're doing all the jobs that other US citizens don't want to do, and they benefit from that because as a result, the prices are lower for them. Myth number three states immigrants are a financial burden to the United States. And this is false because the reality of this is that, like Americans, immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, pay property taxes, they pay sale taxes, and they pay income taxes. And this is because they are given an individual taxpayer identification number, which allows them to file taxes each year. According to a report published in 2017 by the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, undocumented immigrants paid approximately 11.74 billion in state and local taxes annually. And additionally, the US Social Security Administration estimates that in 2010, undocumented immigrants paid 13 billion in payroll taxes alone, which they will never be able to claim because they do not have a social security number. And what's far even worse is that a lot of people think that, oh, they come and use all the welfare and they take all the public benefits. But the reality of this is that because they don't have a social security number and they're unauthorized, they are not eligible for most of the public benefits. These include social security benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, temporary assistance for needy families, and food stamps. So they're contributing to the economy, they're paying taxes, they're putting money into the social security system, but they're not eligible to receive the public welfare. So this is a myth, and it's just far frustrating that they have the audacity to say this, that they're a burden, when in reality, other American citizens are benefiting from the taxes that they put into the social security system. Myth number four. Immigrants coming into the United States are criminals. And this is false, because the reality of this is that unauthorized immigrants are often wrongly associated with criminal activities due to their illegal status. But just because they came into the United States without proper documentation, research shows that simply being an immigrant does not increase the propensity to engage in criminal activity. Data compiled by the American Immigration Council shows that the percentage of people born outside of the United States went up from 7.9 to 13.1. However, between 1990 and 2013, both violent and property crime actually decreased from 48 to 41%. This just shows that it is a myth, and just because they came to the United States through the illegal route doesn't mean that they're criminals. They're coming into the United States searching for a better life for their families, running away from the violence that they're experiencing in the country, and it's not fair for others to be labeling them as criminals. So what does being undocumented in the United States mean? What this means is that you're in a constant fear of deportation and separation from your family, because at any point, if ICE is at work, they can deport you. If you go to court and ICE is there, they can deport you because you're inside of the United States without that legal documentation. So all the life that you've created inside of the United States, having all your family here, it just can all be gone in an instant. Another thing is that because you don't have a social security number, you cannot get a driver's license or a state ID, which means that you're forced to drive unlawfully, and at any point you can get stopped by the police and get a ticket. And just because you're illegal, you can't get that driver's license to drive. Another thing is that you're not eligible for a social security number. So this means that you have limited access to employment opportunities. And at many times, immigrants are forced to work in low-wage jobs and exploited by their employers because a lot of the employers know that they don't have a social security number and they just can't get a job anywhere else in an instant like other Americans. So they force them to work them long hours and pay them less than American citizens because they still have to provide for their family, so they just can't leave their jobs like other American citizens. Another thing is that they have limited access to healthcare. And this is because under the Affordable Care Act, they're not eligible for Medicaid or Medicare. And what's even worse is that they cannot even get a health insurance under the marketplace. So they're forced to pay out of pocket for medical expenses. And as we know, hospital bills are very expensive. So that's why many immigrants, they don't even go to the clinic because they don't have that amount of money to be able to pay those high bills. What's even worse is that they're already getting paid little and not having the opportunity to get Medicaid or Medicare or having health insurance is even far worse. Another thing is that they have challenges in accessing higher education because being undocumented means that you're not eligible for FAFSA as other American citizens, and what's even worse is that you have to pay out-of-state tuition despite living inside of the state for many years. Another thing is that you're not able to leave the United States without risking being able to re-enter. So this means that even if you leave and you try to come back through the illegal route, it's not for sure because you can get caught at the border and it's just far too risky. So I wanted to talk about DACA, which is a Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And what this is that a program that grants undocumented individuals to arrive into the United States when they were children to receive protection from deportation and work authorization. So the problem with DACA is that only individuals who were under 31 before June 15, 2012, and were younger than 16 at the time that DACA was granted were eligible for this program. So this means that anybody who was older at the time or anybody who came after the time that DACA became a law are not eligible for this opportunity. What's far even worse is that in 2021, a judge from Texas deemed the program unlawful and closed it. The Biden administration appealed this decision. However, it is 2024 and we are still awaiting a ruling. It's just far annoying that a lot of presidents promise immigration reform and they don't keep their promises. Elections is already coming up and DACA still remains closed for new applicants.
What undocumented or being undocumented meant until I got to high school.
When people are getting ready to get their driving permit or also apply to college.
All my friends were getting jobs.
But I couldn't because I didn't have a social security number.
Something that I realized very young was that getting pulled over means a lot more when you're undocumented because it could have much more serious consequences.
It can mean separation from your family.
We've heard of people that a ticket can lead to deportation.
When my friend ran over a stop sign and the police pull us over, I would just text everybody I know that like, okay, I'm on this intersection, and then if I don't text you back in 10 or 20 minutes, call, these nonprofit organization.
If you're out and you're in the car and you see the police, you automatically become struck with fear because you just want to be okay.
One of the hardest parts is knowing that nothing is guaranteed. You don't know if you'll come home and your parents will be there, or if you'll make it home that day.
When you leave the house and you leave your parents or your siblings, you don't know if that will be the last time that you saw them. You don't know if when you come back home, they'll be there. So you don't know if that last goodbye you shared with your family, be it your mom, your brother, your sister, your cousin, is the last goodbye that you shared. You're away, you're at the grocery store, you're at school, and you may not be able to come back, or when you do come back, your parents might not be there. The fear and the anxiety is something that you learn and you try to deal with from a very young age.
And then there's when you graduate high school and you've worked your butt off to be able to get that 4.0 GPA.
To get you that scholarship, that financial aid, and once you apply, you realize that
You might have to withdraw because they find out that you're undocumented. Or you might be forced to pay out-of-state tuition, on top of that no financial aid, and this could possibly mean you not being able to anymore go to that school or program.
You know, as undocumented folks, you can't really think of anything in long term. There's never really been a sense of stability, and sometimes it's hard to invest yourself because in my mind, I never knew like in 5 years, in a year, in a couple months, where will I be? So it's hard to plan ahead for life, and it's hard to just work towards something.
This morning, Secretary Napolitano announced new actions my administration will take to mend our nation's immigration policy, to make it more fair, more efficient, and more just, specifically for certain young people, sometimes called dreamers. Now, these are young people who study in our schools, they play in our neighborhoods, they're friends with our kids, they pledge allegiance to our flag. They are Americans in their heart, in their minds, in every single way but one, on paper.
So I also wanted to talk about deportation because it goes hand in hand with immigration. And what deportation is, it is a process of forcibly removing a foreign individual from the United States and returning them to their origin or another designated country. So why do people get deported? As we've been talking about, undocumented immigrants violate immigration laws by either overstaying a visa or entering the United States without legal documentation. Another reason why they can get deported is they commit immigration fraud and misrepresentation. What we saw commonly through the Trump administration were immigration raids. And what this is, it is a legal operation conducted by ICE in homes, workplaces, or public spaces to arrest those that they believe violate immigration laws. Another reason why they can get deported is through criminal convictions. So crimes that are usually deportable are aggravated felonies or crimes involving moral turpitude. So they're serious crimes that these immigrants commit. Another reason why they can get deported is that they pose either a security or public safety threat. So the picture on the right is a picture of the Stewart Detention Center, which is located in Lumpkin, Georgia, where my brother was detained for almost a year before he was deported to Mexico. And deportation is a very difficult topic for me and my family because my brother was deported because he was not allowed due process. So he went to court for a traffic violation, and as soon as he arrived to court, he was taken by ICE. Like, he was not even allowed to see the judge. ICE was already waiting for them, and they got him on the bus and arrested him and took him to Raleigh to get deported. And while he was in the Stewart Detention Center, he stated that it was very difficult conditions. Like, everybody there are treated like criminals. They're not getting adequate care. We saw throughout the years that actually a lot of immigrants at the Stewart Detention Center have actually passed away because they failed to give them the adequate care. And as you can see, they wear orange jumpsuits. Like, if they're criminals, they're treated just like criminals. When he was detained, he was handcuffed from his arms and he was chained from his legs, like if he was a criminal. And it's just upsetting that just because they violate immigration laws by coming to the United States without that legal proper documentation, they're treated like if they're criminals, like if they're gonna do these horrible crimes, when in reality they just are trying to live a better life and they're trying to provide for their family. And it is far upsetting that they criminalize them just for trying to get better opportunities. What is the process of being deported? So first of all, the individual is detained by ICE, and after they're detained, they're sent to a detention center that is very similar to a prison setting, and then they await trial with the judge. According to the American Immigration Council, adults in ICE custody face an average wait of 55 days. But if you're fighting your case, you can wait longer, which it can extend to even up to a year or even more if your case is continued so many times. I also wanted to talk about expedited removal. And we saw this commonly throughout the Trump administration, which is the process of removing the individual without seeing an immigration judge. So you're not even allowed the opportunity to fight your case, you're just deported at the present opportunity. Another thing I wanted to talk about was voluntary departure. And what this means is that you're allowed to leave the country on your own terms instead of being deported. And this is important to know because if you get voluntary departure, you're not automatically barred from legally returning to the United States in the future. The Trump administration recent stance on undocumented immigrants has portrayed many of them as criminals who pose a threat to the country. However, according to a scholarly article published by the Cato Institute, the reality appears to be quite different. The article cites a graph that shows statistics indicating that only 52% of individuals deported between 2009 and 2017 were convicted of crimes, with 60% of these crimes being victimless. The second graph on the right, it is from the same article and provides a further breakdown of the types of crimes that immigrants were charged with when they were deported. So I also wanted to talk about the impact that deportation has on the individual and family. According to an article, deportation can have a psychosocial impact on the deported individual. Immigrants who are deported may be forced to return to dangerous places where they have experienced trauma and violence before their migration. In a family detention centers, almost 80% of families screened have a credible fear of persecution. Deportation from the U.S. has led to the kidnapping, torture, rape, and murder of immigrants in their home countries. Surviving immigrants often face difficulties providing for their families and maintaining contact with them while living apart. This statistic is actually true because, from my family's experience, my brother had actually a credible fear of being persecuted when he arrived at Mexico. He has a tattoo on his neck, which is a symbol of the Aztec sign, which says Made in Mexico. What my brother didn't know is that when he got that tattoo in the United States, he didn't know that it was associated to a gang in Mexico. So as soon as he arrived to the detention center, a lot of people were telling him, as soon as you arrive to Mexico, they're going to cut your head off because you're related to a gang. When in reality, he wasn't. He's been living in the United States his whole life and he's never been associated with gangs. But just because he got that tattoo, he was labeled to that gang. Another thing is that one of my brothers while in Mexico was kidnapped by a cartel. And we also try to state this to ICE that we actually had two credible reasons why we were scared of him being deported. Regardless of that, he was still deported a year later. So deportation can also have a psychosocial impact on children and families. Approximately 5.9 million U.S. citizens' children have at least one caregiver who lacks authorization to live in the United States. So after the parent is deported, a lot of them are forced to support their family on their own. So they already don't have good jobs because they don't have the authorization to work here. So as a result, deportation can lead to food insecurity, housing instability, and economic hardship for children and other family members left behind. Mothers often become single parents with low incomes and must work longer hours, affecting their contact with their children. Older school-age children may become primary caregivers of their younger siblings or have to work to support the family, impacting their academic achievement. Children exhibit symptoms of psychological distress following a caregiver's deportation, including eating and sleeping problems, anxiety, sadness, anger, and withdrawal. Even after the family reunification, the negative impact of family separation often persists. So what are the legal rights of undocumented individuals, and what should you do if an immigration officer shows up at your door? So under the Immigration Nationality Act, ICE officers have the right to arrest and detain you. However, they may not require a warrant if they have a reasonable suspicion of a violation of immigration or federal law. It is important to know that it is not lawful for an immigration officer to apprehend you without having a probable cause. This means that the officer must have information or proof that it makes it likely for you to have violated an immigration law or federal law. As an undocumented individual, you have the right to remain silent. You can inform the ICE officer that you will only answer questions in the presence of an attorney. You are not obligated to respond to any questions regarding your immigration status. If you are detained by the police or ICE, you have the right to an attorney. However, if you're detained by ICE, the government does not have to provide one for you, so it is important that you ask for a list of affordable immigration lawyers. The picture on the right shows an illustration of what you should do if an immigration agent shows up at your door. Do not open the door. Be calm because you have rights. If they ask to enter, ask if they have a warrant signed by a judge. If so, ask to see it. An ICE administrative warrant has to be a Form 4200 or 4205. If they don't have this, they do not have the right to enter without your consent. If they force their way in, don't resist. Tell everyone in the residence to be silent. If you are arrested, remain silent and do not sign anything until you speak to a lawyer. I wanted to finalize this presentation by providing resources available in Charlotte, North Carolina for undocumented immigrants. And I provided information on the areas for legal assistance, the types of legal assistance, the location where you can find the office at, their phone number to contact them at, and a website for more additional information. And so the first one is the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy. The second one is the International House. The third one is the Muslim American Society, and this is for their Charlotte office. They also have multiple offices throughout North Carolina. The fourth one is the Carolina Migrant Network. The fifth one is the Lion American Coalition. And last but not least, the Legal Aid of North Carolina through the Battered Immigrant Project. And this is for their Charlotte office as well. They also have other offices throughout North Carolina. This is my reference page, which includes 18 articles that I used to gather all the information displayed throughout the presentation. I also provided citations for the images that I used throughout the presentation, and I also embedded the citations throughout the presentation in the images. I wanted to thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you have gained insightful information on the immigration system and the impact that it has on undocumented individuals, and hopefully gain more empathy towards undocumented immigrants and an understanding of why it is so difficult to enter the United States through the legal route. I thank you again, and I hope you enjoyed watching.